Jett Lawrence wins again. Yet somehow, it's still an historic first win, because Jett becomes the first rider to ever win in his 450 Supercross debut. Now, as soon as that stat was heard, people started flashing back to famous and memorable Anaheim ones of the past. Damon Bradshaw winning in 1990, Josh Grant's incredible ride in 2009, or Ken Roczen winning in 2014, all rookies in the class. However, all three had moonlighted, even if briefly, in the 450, or in Bradshaw's case, 250 Premier class, before their full-time debut. Bradshaw even had a podium in the 250 class in 1989, which is incredible considering he was only about 5 months removed from racing amateur at Loretta's. Roczen nearly won the Seattle Supercross in 2012, 2 years before his full-time debut, and Grant showed up for one 450 Supercross in his Geico Honda 250 days, racing on the opposite coast west in Seattle in 2008. That doesn't make the performances of Bradshaw, Grant, and Roczen any less memorable. In fact, Grant's first ever win, which was the first for JGR, Roczen's breakthrough at KTM, and Bradshaw doing it at age 17, you could even argue is just as, if not more impressive than what Jett has already done, because Jett has already laid down a perfect season in Pro Motocross and the Super Motocross Championship on a 450, and he won a Moto at Motocross of Nations, and he won the Paris Supercross. The list goes on and on. This is merely a stat. The stat says that it was Jett's first 450 Supercross, and it was not the first Premier Class race for Grant, Roczen, or Bradshaw. But what about deeper in time? Well, yes, there's one rider that won the first Premier Class Supercross they ever entered, and that's the rider that won the first Supercross race that there ever was. That's Marty Tripes. He's also the youngest winner ever. He was 16. And he won the 1972 Super Bowl of Motocross held at the LA Memorial Coliseum. It was long before the idea of Supercross or even the name existed, but it is still considered the race that is the birthplace of modern Supercross. Now, if you want to make the argument that Tripes won the first Supercross race he was ever in, well, factually that is true. However, somebody had to win the first race. No matter who it was, they were going to have won the first Supercross race they were ever in, even though they didn't know that it was actually Supercross at the time. It was just a motocross race held in a stadium called the Super Bowl of Motocross. The term Supercross wouldn't come around for about another 3 years. There are other arguments. Pierre Karsmakers won the opening round of what became the first ever Supercross Championship, the 1974 Super Series, and that started at Daytona. But does that make Karsmakers, who won that Daytona race, a rookie winner? Well, not really. He'd actually competed in the 1973 Super Bowl of Motocross before that and did not win. And also Karsmakers won Daytona the previous year. But the funny part was the previous year's Daytona was considered part of the 500 AMA National Motocross Championship. So Karsmakers had actually won that race the year before, it just had a different name. But whatever, Karsmakers competed at the LA Coliseum race the year before he won Daytona, so it doesn't sound like he was a rookie when he won Daytona in '74. But there's one other candidate, Jimmy Ellis. You could also argue that Ellis had the only perfect season in Supercross history, albeit the 1975 championship only had 3 points-paying races, and Ellis, on a Can-Am, actually won all 3, starting with Dallas and then going to Daytona and Houston. But did Ellis race any Supercross races before that opening round win at Dallas in '75? It's hard to tell. We can't find archives that go all the way through the field of every single person who had signed up for races in 1974. However, Ellis is quoted in interviews saying he did race Supercross in 1974. He also suffered a big injury in that '74 season, and we think that injury might have taken place actually while racing the Daytona Supercross. But still, it's just so hard to compare race wins from the first 3 to 4 years that Supercross as a sport existed to what Jett Lawrence, or even Roczen, Bradshaw, and Grant had done before. Again, this isn't to diminish anyone's accomplishments. These are all great champions and riders that took significant wins. The comparison is hard, but the stat belongs to Lawrence. It's not to say anything of it. He definitely had more 450 experience in general than most rookies coming in because he actually moved up during the Motocross Championship. He'd already raced indoors, ironically at the LA Coliseum on a 450 in a race that was considered SMX and not Supercross. It's just a stat. And the stat says that Jett is the first to win on his debut. If you want to root for Marty Tripes, there's no doubt he did win in the first Supercross race he was ever in. It was also everyone else's first Supercross race. So, the facts are what they are, but it's up to you to come up with your own interpretation of what they actually mean. And really, it doesn't mean all that much. Because the real story for Lawrence going forward will be, will he continue to win races after Anaheim? Remember, he won his 450 motocross debut, and he hasn't lost a motocross race yet. He's really won all but one points-paying race, the Charlotte SMX opener. Congratulations, Chase Sexton became the man to win a SMX race in his first ever attempt. That's because it was everyone's first race. Back to Lawrence. Roczen, Bradshaw, and Grant were great in their rookie seasons, but they did not go on to win the Supercross title. Meanwhile, two other riders, Jeremy McGrath and Ryan Dungey, did not win their openers, but did go on to win the 450 titles as rookies. Jett's record on a 450 in any type of event is enviable. He's won a whole lot more than he's lost. Will the experienced veterans be able to turn the tables on him, or will the perils of Supercross, well known, eventually get the best of him? It turns out that the most important stat will only be figured out at the end of this Supercross campaign, and not the beginning.